Have you ever felt like someone was trying to tell you something, but you were too distracted to hear it? What if the most important message you'll ever receive isn't about money, success, or fame, but about the choices that quietly shape your future? Imagine hearing these words. I'm saying this directly to you. Please listen carefully. For a moment, forget the headlines. Forget the billions. Forget the rockets, the electric cars, and the interviews. Because the story you're about to hear isn't a documentary about Elon Musk's private life. It's a cinematic, fictional story inspired by the mindset people often associate with him. A story about ambition, relationships, sacrifice, and the emotional cost of always chasing the next impossible dream. And before this story ends, one question may completely change the way you see your own life. Because sometimes the greatest distance isn't between Earth and Mars. Sometimes it's between two people sitting in the same room. The room was silent. Outside the window, city lights stretched across the horizon like tiny stars scattered across the ground. Inside, a single desk lamp illuminated stacks of notebooks filled with sketches, ideas, impossible equations, and dreams that refused to stay dreams. The man sitting there wasn't simply thinking about technology. He was thinking about time. More specifically, to know how little of it any of us truly have. Success has a strange way of convincing people they're moving forward, even when parts of their lives remain frozen. Most people believe achievement solves loneliness. But what if achievement simply hides it? That question lingered in the room longer than anyone realized. The truth was far more complicated. From the outside, people admired relentless ambition. From the inside, ambition often demanded silent sacrifices no one applauded. Hours became days. Days became months. Messages remained unanswered. Conversations became shorter. Promises slowly transformed into maybe next week. At first, nobody noticed. Life always gives reasonable excuses. I'm busy. I'll make it up to you. Just one more project. But what happened next shocked everyone. Not because something dramatic happened overnight. Because nothing dramatic happened at all. Distance rarely arrives with an explosion. It arrives quietly. To one postponed dinner. One forgotten anniversary. One conversation that never happens. One, I'm fine, that really means, please notice me. Have you ever wondered why relationships sometimes disappear without a single argument? Maybe that's because silence can be louder than conflict. Maybe people don't always leave because they stop caring. Sometimes they leave because they stop feeling seen. That realization would become one of the most important lessons in this story. But no one understood it yet. Especially not the man who believed every problem could eventually be solved with enough intelligence. Some problems refuse to be engineered. Some require presence instead of solutions. And that changes everything. Picture a younger version of our character. Curious, obsessed, unable to stop asking questions. While others accepted the world as it was, he constantly imagined how it could become something different. That relentless curiosity became his greatest strength. It also became his greatest distraction. Because curiosity has no finish line. Every answer creates 5 new questions. Every achievement reveals another mountain waiting to be climbed. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Or rather, what he failed to realize. There is a difference between building a remarkable future, and forgetting to live in the present. Most people don't notice that difference until years have passed. By then, memories have already become photographs. The strange thing about ambition is that it rarely announces its price in advance. Instead, it asks for tiny payments. An evening here, a weekend there, a vacation canceled, another late night, another promise delayed. Individually, they seem insignificant. Together, they reshape an entire life. Yet one question remained unanswered. How much success is enough? No one seemed able to answer. Not friends, not mentors, not critics. Because enough means something different to every person. Some chase comfort, some chase recognition, some chase history. But what happens when the finish line keeps moving? Imagine running toward the horizon. No matter how fast you run, the horizon never gets closer. Many lives look exactly like that. Busy, productive, successful, exhausted. The world celebrates movement. Few people stop to ask whether they're moving toward the life they actually want. Our fictional Elon often replayed old conversations in his mind, not because he regretted working hard, but because he wondered whether he had mistaken productivity for connection. Those are not the same thing. One builds companies. The other builds trust. One creates innovation. The other creates belonging. Without realizing it, many people become experts in one while neglecting the other. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. Have you ever finished a long day feeling accomplished, yet strangely empty? Why does that happen? Psychologists often describe humans as meaning-seeking creatures. Accomplishment provides excitement. Connection provides meaning. Without both, something always feels incomplete. The truth was far more complicated than anyone expected. Relationships rarely fail because two people suddenly stop loving each other. More often, they slowly stop understanding each other. Understanding requires curiosity, not the curiosity that builds machines. The curiosity that asks, "How are you? Really?" That's a very different question, and it requires an entirely different kind of intelligence, emotional intelligence. Unlike technical skill, emotional awareness cannot be automated. There is no shortcut, no algorithm, no software update, only attention. Attention has quietly become one of the most valuable resources in the modern world. Everyone wants it. Very few know how to give it. Our fictional Elon began noticing something uncomfortable. Whenever someone spoke to him, his mind was already solving tomorrow's problems. His body occupied the room. His attention lived somewhere else. How many conversations end this way every day, more than we realize? People don't simply hear our words. They feel our presence, or our absence. That difference changes relationships forever. But what happened next shocked everyone. One evening, after another impossibly long day, the room finally became quiet. No notifications, no meetings, no deadlines, just silence. Real silence. For the first time in weeks, there was nothing demanding immediate attention. Yet instead of feeling peace, he felt restless. Why? Because many people become so accustomed to constant motion that stillness feels uncomfortable. Silence forces us to meet ourselves. Sometimes that's the hardest meeting of all. The questions we'd been avoiding quietly return. Was this worth it? Who have I become? Who have I unintentionally neglected? Would the people I love describe me the same way I describe myself? Those questions have no easy answers. Perhaps that's why so many people avoid asking them. The room seemed larger now. Or maybe the silence simply revealed what had always been there. Memories drifted into view. Laughter. Old conversations. Dreams shared long before success entered the picture. Back then, everything felt simpler. Not easier. Simpler. People often believe complexity is proof of progress. Sometimes complexity is merely accumulated distraction. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. He remembered a sentence he'd once heard years earlier. The future is built one day at a time. At first it sounded obvious. Now it sounded different. If the future is built one day at a time, then relationships are too. You cannot postpone kindness forever and expect closeness to remain unchanged. You cannot repeatedly choose later without eventually creating distance. Distance isn't always measured in miles. Sometimes it's measured in moments never shared. The realization settled heavily, but another mystery remained. If everyone understands relationships matter, why do so many intelligent people accidentally neglect them? Maybe because urgent things constantly disguise themselves as important. Emails feel urgent. Deadlines feel urgent. Notifications feel urgent. Presence rarely feels urgent. Until it's missing. Then it becomes priceless. Our fictional Elon stared out the window once again. The city hadn't changed. The lights were still glowing. Traffic still flowed beneath. Somewhere below, countless people hurried home. Others hurried back to work. Everyone chasing something. Everyone believing tomorrow would finally create enough time. But tomorrow has an unusual habit. It keeps becoming today. And today keeps slipping away. Yet one question remained unanswered. What if the life you're trying so hard to build quietly depends on the conversations you're coats in the tov de retourments? What if success isn't asking you to sacrifice connection? What if balance was never about having more time, but about choosing where your attention truly belongs? The answer wouldn't come tonight, not yet, because another unexpected encounter was about to challenge everything our fictional Elon believed about achievement, identity, and love. And when that conversation finally happened, nothing would ever look the same again. The question from the previous chapter refused to disappear. What if the conversations we postpone eventually become the ones we can never have? That thought echoed through the silence long after the lights in the office had gone dark. Outside, the city continued moving with relentless energy, as if every person below were racing toward an invisible finish line. Inside, however, time seemed to slow. Our fictional Elon sat alone, surrounded by blueprints of extraordinary ideas, yet unable to ignore an ordinary truth. For years, he had believed that every challenge had a logical solution. If a rocket failed, redesign it. If a battery overheated, improve it. If production slowed, optimize the process. But human hearts did not respond to engineering. Relationships did not improve because someone worked harder. Trust could not be accelerated like manufacturing. The truth was far more complicated. That realization stayed with him as he prepared for another demanding week. Meetings filled every hour. Engineers expected answers. Investors wanted confidence. Employees looked for direction. Every decision carried enormous consequences. From the outside, this looked like power. From the inside, it often felt like pressure. People rarely see the emotional weight carried by those who lead. They notice the victories, but not the sleepless nights. They celebrate success without witnessing the fear of making the wrong decision. And yet one question remained unanswered. How do you lead millions of people without losing yourself? Perhaps the answer had never been about leadership at all. Perhaps it had always been about self-awareness. One afternoon, after another marathon of meetings, our fictional Elon found himself sitting across from an old friend he hadn't spoken to in years. The conversation began with laughter, stories, memories, the kind of memories that instantly transport you back to a simpler time. For a while, nothing felt different. Then his friend asked a question. When was the last time you were truly present? The room became quiet, not because the question was difficult, because it was honest. Most people measure their lives by accomplishments. Very few measure them by presence. Presence cannot be photographed. It cannot be announced on social media. It earns no headlines. Yet it quietly shapes every meaningful relationship we ever have. Our fictional Elon searched for an answer but couldn't find one. His calendar was full. His life was full. Yet somehow, something important still felt missing. Have you ever experienced that feeling? A schedule packed with responsibilities but an unexpected emptiness that appears when everything finally becomes quiet. Psychologists often explain that human beings adapt quickly to success. The promotion that once felt life-changing eventually becomes normal. The larger home becomes ordinary. The expensive car becomes familiar. The excitement fades. This is known as hedonic adaptation. But genuine relationships don't work that way. A meaningful conversation can stay with us for decades. A single act of kindness can permanently change someone's life. The truth was far more complicated than material success alone. Our fictional Elon realized he had spent years upgrading machines while unintentionally allowing some personal connections to operate on old assumptions. He assumed people understood how much he cared. He assumed they knew his intentions. He assumed there would always be another opportunity to explain. Assumptions are dangerous, not because they are always wrong, because they prevent conversations that need to happen. But what happened next shocked everyone. His friends smiled gently and asked another question. If someone only experienced the version of you they received today, would they know the person you hope to become? The words landed with unexpected force. Most of us believe people judge our intentions. In reality, people experience our actions. Intentions remain invisible. Presence becomes visible. Kindness becomes visible. Listening becomes visible. Imagine trying to build the world's most advanced technology while forgetting to update the potions. Emotional software guiding your own life. That comparison stayed with him. Maybe personal growth wasn't about becoming someone different. Maybe it was about removing the distractions, preventing us from becoming who we already wanted to be. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why do intelligent people often struggle with emotional communication? The answer surprised him. Because intelligence and vulnerability are different skills. One solves external problems. The other requires facing internal ones. Our fictional Elon had spent decades confronting impossible engineering challenges. But admitting fear, expressing uncertainty, saying I need help, those challenges felt surprisingly unfamiliar. Many ambitious people quietly experience the same struggle. Society rewards certainty. Relationships often require honesty instead. There is a difference. A significant difference. One evening, unable to stop thinking about these conversations, he decided to take a long walk. No assistance, no phone calls, no meetings, just silence. The cool evening air carried a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in months. As he walked, memories surfaced unexpectedly. He remembered moments when he had been completely absorbed in conversations. Conversations without distractions, without notifications, without constantly thinking about tomorrow. Those moments shared one thing in common. He hadn't been trying to impress anyone. He had simply been present. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Presence is not the absence of ambition. It is the decision that the person standing in front of you deserves your complete attention. That sounds simple. It rarely is. Modern life constantly competes for our attention. Every notification whispers that something else is more important. Every email claims urgency. Every headline demands emotion. Meanwhile, the people closest to us often wait patiently for the version of ourselves that isn't to get too distracted. How long should anyone have to wait? The question lingered. The truth was far more complicated. During the following weeks, our fictional Elon began experimenting with something unusual. Instead of trying to optimize every minute, he tried to fully experience a few moments. At first, it felt uncomfortable. His mind constantly drifted toward unfinished projects, future plans, potential problems. But gradually something changed. The conversations became deeper. The laughter became more genuine. The silence between words no longer felt awkward. It felt peaceful. Psychologists sometimes describe active listening as one of the strongest foundations of trust. People rarely remember every word we say. They almost always remember how we made them feel. That insight transformed the way he viewed communication. Listening wasn't passive. It was one of the highest forms of respect. But what happened next shocked everyone. Just as life seemed to regain a sense of balance, unexpected challenges appeared. Major setbacks struck one of his ambitious projects. Public criticism intensified. News headlines questioned every decision. Social media amplified every mistake. The pressure returned stronger than before. Old habits quietly waited in the background. The temptation to withdraw emotionally became overwhelming. After all, focusing exclusively on work felt familiar, predictable, safe. Relationships required uncertainty. Machines followed logic. People followed emotions. And emotions cannot always be predicted. Have you ever noticed how stress changes the way people communicate? Some become louder. Others become silent. Some seek connection. Others isolate themselves. Neither response automatically solves the problem. Today awareness does. Our fictional Elon recognized the pattern before it completely took over. He caught himself reaching for work every time uncomfortable emotions surfaced. It wasn't because he loved work more than people. It was because work felt easier to control. That realization was unsettling. How many of us use productivity to avoid difficult conversations? How often do we convince ourselves we're simply busy when we're actually protecting ourselves from emotional discomfort? Those questions became impossible to ignore. Yet one mystery remained. Could someone truly change habits developed over an entire lifetime? Many experts believe lasting transformation rarely happens through dramatic moments. It happens through repeated small choices. Choosing to listen. Choosing to apologize. Choosing to ask another question instead of assuming the answer. Choosing to stay present even when the mind wants to escape elsewhere. The change is almost invisible at first. Until one day, you realize your relationships feel different. Not because life became easier, because you became more intentional. As the weeks continued, our fictional Elon noticed something remarkable. The people around him weren't expecting perfection. They weren't asking for impossible promises. Most simply wanted honesty, consistency, attention. Those gifts cost nothing. Yet they remain among the rarest things we can offer another human being. The city lights appeared once again outside his office window. This time they looked different. Not because the city had changed, because he had. For the first time in years, he understood that building an extraordinary future required more than innovation. It required emotional courage, the courage to admit mistakes, the courage to slow down, the courage to value moments that never appear in history books, but shape the people we become. Still, one final mystery remained unanswered. Just when it seemed he had begun discovering what truly mattered, a single unexpected conversation would challenge every lesson he believed he had learned. And the words spoken during that conversation would force him to make the most difficult choice of his life. What happened next would change everything. The silence after that realization felt different. It was no longer the silence of exhaustion. It was the silence that comes just before an important decision. For days, the questions refused to leave our fictional Elon's mind. What does success actually mean if the people you care about no longer recognize the person you jumped become? Can someone spend years building the future while accidentally drifting away from the present? And perhaps the most difficult question of all, if you could go back, what moments would you choose differently? The answers were not waiting inside another meeting. They were not hidden inside another blueprint. They certainly weren't buried beneath another impossible deadline. The truth was far more complicated. Sometimes the answers we spend years searching for have been quietly waiting inside, conversations we've been avoiding. As another week began, everything appeared normal on the surface. The schedule remained packed. Important decisions continued arriving every hour. Messages flooded every screen. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, however, everything was changing. Our fictional Elon had begun noticing something he had ignored for years. People rarely asked him about technology when the cameras disappeared. They asked about purpose, about happiness, about balance, about whether success had actually brought peace. Those questions lingered long after every interview ended. Perhaps they lingered because there was no perfect answer. One afternoon, after speaking at an event filled with ambitious young entrepreneurs, a student approached him. The room had nearly emptied. Staff members quietly packed equipment while the audience slowly disappeared into the evening. The student hesitated before speaking. "I have one question." Our fictional Elon smiled. "Go ahead." The student looked nervous. If you had to choose between becoming unforgettable or becoming deeply loved, which one would matter more? The question seemed simple. It wasn't. The room became silent once again. Because sometimes the shortest questions demand the longest reflections. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. For years, he had believed those two goals could naturally exist together. But life often forces difficult priorities. Recognition can come at a cost. So can ambition. So can comfort. Every meaningful choice asks us to sacrifice something. The real challenge is deciding what deserves that sacrifice. The student waited patiently. Finally, our fictional Elon answered. I think I spent many years believing history was the audience I needed to impress. He paused. But history doesn't hug you when you're struggling. The student nodded quietly. It doesn't celebrate birthdays with you. Another pause. It doesn't ask how you're feeling. The truth was far more complicated than fame or achievement. Recognition may inspire millions. Connection changes individuals. And every individual relationship quietly shapes the quality of an entire life. The student thanked him before leaving. Yet those few minutes remained unforgettable, because sometimes strangers accidentally ask the questions our closest friends are too afraid to ask. Have you ever experienced that? A conversation lasting only minutes, yet remembered for years? Those moments rarely happen by accident. They happen because truth recognizes truth. As evening arrived, our fictional Elon drove without a destination. No meetings, no interviews, no expectations, just miles of open road and uninterrupted thought. The setting sun painted the horizon with shades of orange and gold. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow. He was thinking about yesterday. Memory has a strange way of editing our lives. It removes ordinary details. It preserves emotions. He couldn't remember every business meeting, but he remembered meaningful conversations. He couldn't recall every successful presentation, but he remembered moments when someone genuinely believed in him. He couldn't list every accomplishment in chronological order, yet he clearly remembered every person who encouraged him during uncertain seasons. Why? Because human beings remember emotional significance more than factual detail. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon for decades. Our emotions decide which memories survive, not our calendars. That realization carried enormous weight. If memories are built through emotion, then perhaps the greatest investment isn't time itself, it's attention. But what happened next shocked everyone. As he arrived home later that evening, he noticed an old notebook sitting on a shelf. Its cover was worn, its pages slightly faded. Curious, he opened it. Inside were handwritten thoughts from years earlier. Dreams, questions, ideas. Some had become reality. Others had quietly disappeared with time. One sentence caught his attention immediately. Never become so busy building your future that you forget why you wanted that future in the sky. He stared at the words. He couldn't even remember writing them, yet they felt more relevant now than ever before. How often do we abandon our original purpose while chasing success? Many people begin their journey hoping to create freedom. Eventually they become prisoners of their own schedules. Others work hard to provide for loved ones, only to realize they rarely spend time with those same people. The irony is difficult to ignore. Our fictional Elon closed the notebook slowly. Perhaps wisdom isn't discovering something completely new. Perhaps wisdom is remembering truths we already knew, but gradually forgot. Yet one question remained unanswered. Could insight alone change behavior? Knowing better doesn't always lead to living better. Transformation requires repetition. Every day presents another opportunity to choose differently. The following morning began unlike any other. Instead of immediately reaching for notifications, our fictional Elon simply sat in silence. 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. No distractions, just observation. At first his thoughts raced endlessly. Ideas, concerns, projects, responsibilities. Then gradually, the noise settled. Clarity emerged. He realized something surprisingly simple. Most stress wasn't created by the present moment. It was created by mentally living somewhere else, either regretting yesterday or worrying about tomorrow. Meanwhile, today quietly disappeared. Have you ever caught yourself doing the same thing? Physically present, mentally absent? It's one of the most common experiences in modern life. Yet few people recognize it while it's happening. The truth was far more complicated. Presence isn't a talent, it's a practice. Just like strength grows through repeated exercise, attention grows through repeated intention. Throughout the following weeks, subtle changes continued appearing. Our fictional Elon began asking better questions during conversations. Instead of immediately offering solutions, he listened longer. Instead of assuming people needed advice, he first tried understanding their perspective. This single habit transformed countless interactions. People opened up more, misunderstandings decreased, trust quietly deepened. Why? Because feeling understood is one of the deepest emotional needs every human shares. Not admired, not impressed, understood. There is an enormous difference. But what happened next shocked everyone. One evening, while watching the city skyline from his office window, another realization arrived unexpectedly. He had spent years believing extraordinary lives required extraordinary moments. Perhaps extraordinary lives are actually built from ordinary moments experienced fully. One conversation, one apology, one expression of gratitude, one decision to stay instead of walking away. These moments rarely make headlines, yet they shape destinies. The city lights below reminded him of countless unseen stories unfolding simultaneously. Someone was celebrating, someone was grieving, someone was falling in love, someone was quietly giving up. Every person carried invisible battles. That understanding changed the way he viewed strangers. Kindness became easier, patience became more natural, judgment became less appealing, because you never truly know what another person is carrying. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Success without compassion feels incomplete. Knowledge without humility becomes dangerous. Achievement without relationships eventually feels empty. Those weren't business lessons. They were life lessons. And still, one final chapter remained. One final conversation. One final truth waiting to be revealed. Everything leading to this point had prepared him for a choice far greater than career, reputation, or recognition. A choice about identity, about legacy, about what truly remains when the applause fades and the headlines disappear. Because in the end, people rarely remember us for the titles we held. They remember how they felt when they were with us. And in the final chapter, our fictional Elon would discover that the most powerful message he could ever share had nothing to do with technology, wealth, or impossible dreams. It had everything to do with being fully present for the people who matter most. What happened next would become the most important lesson of all. The journey had led to this moment, not a product launch, not a historic announcement, not another breakthrough that would dominate headlines. Instead, it was something much quieter, something infinitely more personal. If you've stayed with this story until now, you've probably noticed that it was never really about building rockets, companies, or revolutionary technology. It was a fictional, inspirational journey about the choices every ambitious person eventually faces. The question from the beginning still remained. What if the most important message you'll ever hear isn't about becoming more successful, but about becoming more present? Our fictional Elon stood once again beside the same window where this journey had begun. The city lights still stretched endlessly into the distance. Cars continued moving through the streets. People hurried toward destinations only they understood. The world hadn't slowed down, but he had, and that changed everything. For years, he believed the next achievement would finally bring complete satisfaction, the next milestone, the next innovation, the next impossible goal. Yet every finish line quietly transformed into another starting line. Success wasn't the destination he had imagined. It was simply another chapter. The truth was far more complicated. Many people spend their lives chasing more without ever asking a simple question. More? For what? More money? More recognition? More influence? None of those goals are wrong. But without purpose, they become endless. Imagine climbing a mountain for years, only to discover another mountain waiting behind it. Would you continue climbing, or would you stop long enough to appreciate the view? That question echoed through his thoughts. Perhaps you've asked yourself something similar. Have you ever reached a goal you once believed would change everything, only to realize the feeling faded much faster than expected? If so, you're not alone. Psychologists have long observed that people quickly adapt to achievements. What once felt extraordinary eventually becomes ordinary. That doesn't mean success is meaningless. It means lasting fulfillment comes from something deeper than accomplishment alone. Our fictional Elon finally understood that difference. Achievement creates excitement. Meaning creates peace. Excitement comes and goes. Peace stays. But what happened next shocked everyone. The following morning, he arrived at work carrying no dramatic announcement, no revolutionary presentation. Instead, he carried a notebook, not one filled with technical designs, a blank notebook. Its first page contained only one sentence. What kind of person do I want people to remember? He stared at the words for several minutes. Notice what the question didn't ask. It didn't ask how wealthy he wanted to become. It didn't ask how famous he wanted to be. It didn't ask how many companies he wanted to build. It asked about character. Because in the end, character quietly outlives accomplishment. Think about the people who have influenced your own life. Was it because of their resume, or because of how they treated you? Most of us remember kindness long after we forget credentials. We remember encouragement, patience, forgiveness, belief. Those moments become part of our identity. Our fictional Elon began writing, here, not business strategies, life principles. I will listen before I respond. I will choose curiosity over assumption. I will remember that attention is one of the greatest gifts I can give. I will never confuse being busy with being present. Simple sentences, Powerful reminders, because even the most ambitious people need to remember what truly matters. Yet one question remained unanswered. Would these insights survive when life became difficult again? Because transformation isn't tested during peaceful seasons. It's tested during stressful ones. A few weeks later, the answer arrived. Unexpected problems emerged. Important deadlines approached. Public criticism intensified. The familiar pressure returned. The old version of himself would have disappeared completely into work. He almost did. Almost. Then he noticed the notebook resting quietly on his desk. He opened it. He reread the first sentence. What kind of person do I want people to remember? Suddenly, the decision became clearer. Not easier. Clearer. He still worked hard. He still pursued ambitious goals. But he refused to let urgency erase humanity. He made time for conversations. He apologized when necessary. He asked questions, instead of making assumptions. He chose presence, even when productivity seemed more tempting. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Promise isn't about working less. It's about remembering why you're working in the first place. Purpose gives ambition direction. Without purpose, ambition simply keeps running. The truth was far more complicated than anyone expected. Many people don't actually regret working hard. They regret forgetting what mattered while they were working hard. The missed conversations, the postponed memories, the words they assumed could always wait until tomorrow. But tomorrow makes no promises. That realization became impossible to ignore. One evening, our fictional Elon walked through the city alone. No cameras, no interviews, no headlines. Just another person surrounded by millions of strangers. He noticed something he'd overlooked countless times. People weren't chasing perfection. Most were simply trying to feel seen. A father laughed with his daughter while crossing the street. An elderly couple held hands without saying a word. Friends gathered at a small cafe, smiling over ordinary conversations. Nothing extraordinary was happening. Yet everything meaningful was. Life wasn't hiding in dramatic moments. It was quietly unfolding inside ordinary ones. Have you ever rushed through a beautiful day because you were thinking about the next one? How many sunsets have we missed while looking down at a screen? How many conversations ended before they truly began because our attention was somewhere else? Those questions stayed with him. Perhaps they'll stay with you as well. Because this story was never meant to give you answers. It was meant to help you ask better questions. Questions like, who deserves more of my attention? What memories am I creating today? If someone described me 5 years from now, what would I hope they would say? Would they remember my achievements first? Or my kindness? Would they remember my success? Or how safe they felt around me? Those questions matter, far more than most people realize. The world celebrates visible success, but invisible character shapes visible success. Without integrity, achievement feels fragile. Without empathy, intelligence feels incomplete. Without gratitude, abundance never feels sufficient. Our fictional Elon understood that now. Not because someone lectured him, because life quietly taught him. And life often teaches its greatest lessons through reflection, rather than applause. But what happened next shocked everyone. Months later, during another conversation with young innovators, someone asked him one final question. If you could send one message to every person watching this, what would it be? He smiled. Not the smile of someone who believed he had every answer. The smile of someone who had finally learned to ask better questions. He looked across the room and spoke slowly. If you're waiting for the perfect moment to tell someone they matter, he paused. Don't wait. The room became completely silent. If you're waiting until you're less busy, another pause. You'll always find another reason. He looked around the room. The future you, working so hard to build, will only be meaningful if you have people to share it with. No one moved. No one interrupted. Because everyone understood. Deep down, we already know what's important. We simply forget. That's why reminders matter. That's why stories matter. That's why moments like this matter. As our fictional journey comes to an end, remember this. Success can change your circumstances. Discipline can change your habits. Knowledge can change your decisions. But love, compassion, presence, those change lives, including your own. So before you move on with your day, ask yourself one final question. Who in your life needs to hear from you today? Not next week, not next month, today. Perhaps a simple conversation could change more than you imagine. Perhaps forgiveness has been waiting for your first step. Perhaps gratitude has been delayed for far too long. And perhaps the message your greet's been searching for throughout this entire story was never hidden inside someone else's chime. Lyra, perhaps it was always meant for you. If this story made you pause, reflect, or see your own life from a different perspective, share it with someone who may need this reminder today. Leave a comment describing one lesson that stayed with you until the very end. And if you enjoy cinematic stories about mindset, resilience, emotional intelligence, and the psychology behind meaningful success, subscribe and join us for the next journey. Because sometimes one story doesn't just entertain us. Sometimes it quietly changes the way we choose to live. The end.